Welcome again to the Open Classroom, the 21st Century City. This should be an interesting evening. A year and a half ago, when Paul, Grogan, and I did the field test for this set of lectures and course, we had very different speakers all semester, except for tonight. And we had such an incredible discussion about urban transit, mega projects, infrastructure, particularly because of the three people who are here tonight, David Luberoff, Stephanie Pollack, Fred Salvucci, that we felt we could not pass up the opportunity to do this discussion again. So you're in for an incredible evening. I think many of you who emailed me, I want to thank you for your wonderful emails, some of your comments on our blog about last week's conversation with Jim Carroll and Barry Schrade on the whole meaning of community. I'm thrilled that many of you enjoyed it as much as I did. My wife, who was here when we got home, said, you know, and she's the psychologist, I'm the economist, she said there are some meals that are just meals, and then others are durable goods. And she said, last week's lecture was a durable good. So I think we're going to have another one that you will remember for a long time, because I've remembered this one vividly for now a year and a half. We will be back here next week when we look at the whole issue of housing. And housing has been such a critical factor in the national and regional economy over the last 24 to 36 months that I think you'll find it very interesting to see how we pose those questions. We'll give you a glimpse at a new report that we will be presenting on October 28th at the Boston Foundation. We won't give you too much of it so that you'll still be excited when the report comes out, but I think you're going to find next week also quite fascinating. So without further ado, Professor Grogan will introduce the class for today. Welcome again. We're glad you're here.
Well, thank you very much, Barry. I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speakers this evening. We're going to take roughly the first hour for their presentations, and then we'll have a brief break, and the second hour we will have a conversation among the three of them and all of us as well. Last week's class was, I think really electrifying. The conversation between Barry Schrade of Combined Jewish Philanthropies and noted author James Carroll, but it was about a topic that can be a somewhat intangible or ethereal, the notion of urban community. We're going to get very tangible tonight in talking about transportation and infrastructure. And there could hardly be a more central issue to the health of cities, indeed the existence of cities, than transportation. After all, transportation advantage really explains the origin of cities in the first place and where they happen to be located. It was a transportation advantage that aided commerce in some form or fashion that explains the location. That explains the location of most cities around the world. And of course, these cities were all on water. Natural water, and then later man-made water in some cases, for instance, the Erie Canal. And then, of course, rail lines came in, but the same phenomenon really exists. So the very existence of cities is so intertwined with the issue of transportation. And as Professor Bluestone pointed out in his early lectures about what makes a city, cities exist to shorten transactions in one form or another. And the great industrial cities of the Northeast and Midwest in the United States obviously were driven by the need to cluster associated activities related to manufacturing in most cases. And then we have seen that changes in industry and technology weakened that rationale for those industrial cities, because the functions that were originally grouped there no longer had to be in such proximity. And of course, that is fundamentally related to transportation technology and improvements, as well as the cost of transportation plummeted throughout the 20th century, and obviously weakening the rationale for clustered activities. So related to that very directly is the rise of the automobile. Barry says in his book, nothing transformed the relationship between city and suburb more than the automobile. In 1948, there were 33 million cars in America. By 1960, there were 61 million. By 1980, 124 million. So the development of the automobile and the infrastructure improvements that related to it, like the creation of the interstate highway system, represented, I would argue, profoundly anti-city transportation policies because they eased the flow back and forth to the suburbs, permitted the decentralization of population and commerce that we're so familiar with today, and of course the very construction of the interstate highway system often destroyed what were in some cases thriving urban neighborhoods, and the land takings for portions of that system that were never completed created vast wastelands in many cities that still exist. In fact, it's interesting to note that much of the proposed development, or the development that's occurring and that's proposed in the city of Boston, has to do with binding up the wounds inflicted by the creation of highways. So today we want to consider transportation and infrastructure in the light of the economy of today and the challenges of creating robust and vital cities in the 21st century. And of course, this is an extremely complex matter having to do with the orchestration of many forms of transportation that are often under different authorities and very difficult to orchestrate or coordinate in any kind of strategic way. There are also new issues that are in the transportation discussion, or relatively new issues, for instance, that have to do with energy conservation and climate change, and the arrangement of transportation to maximize the considerable potential that cities have to reduce energy costs, although cities are already the most energy efficient form of settlement that we have. There persists the whole issue of trying to have transportation optimize the economic potential in any particular city. For instance, what should be the transportation system that facilitates the maximum growth and potential of the life sciences cluster in a city like Boston, where we have enormous assets, our research universities, teaching hospitals, technology companies, the sheer brain power. But what is the transportation system that is going to permit the maximum productive interaction of those assets and the people associated with them? And of course, we have the hardy perennial debate of automobiles versus mass transit, which is always with us. It's being renewed every day in some form or fashion. I would be very surprised if that's not discussed by all of our speakers in one form or another. So I think we're going to have a very interesting evening, and we have three experts who have done a lot of work in writing about these issues. And I'm going to introduce them all at once in order, and they will speak in this order. First, we're going to hear from David Luberoff, who is the Executive Director of the Rappaport Institute for Greater Boston. He became director in June 2004. The Rappaport Institute at Harvard is an institute devoted to the study of local and regional issues, and really represents a wonderful resource for this city and region, as does, of course, the Center for Urban Regional Policy at Northeastern. David is the co-author with Alan Altshuler of the book Mega Projects, The Changing Politics of Urban Public Investment, Brookings Institution Press. It was named the year's best book on urban politics by the American Political Science Association in 2003. David is also a former journalist who was an editor of the Tab, Greater Boston's largest weekly newspaper, and he has a master's degree in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government. David will be followed by Stephanie Pollack, who's the Associate Director of Research here at the Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy. Stephanie is the Associate Director of the Dukakis Center. She's a nationally known environmental attorney with more than 25 years of policy and advocacy experience in the environment, energy, smart growth, environmental health, and transportation fields. For many years, and this is how I got to know her, she was a senior executive and attorney at the Conservation Law Foundation, New England's most important environmental advocacy group. And finally, we're going to hear from my good friend Fred Salvucci. Fred is a civil engineer by training, specializing in transportation. He came to renown first as Mayor Kevin White's transportation director between 1970 and 1974, and that was followed by 2 stints working for Governor Dukakis as Secretary of Transportation between 1975 and 1978, and again from 1983 to 1990. And during those times, Fred has had a profound impact on the transportation planning and development of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, really for a period of over 30 years, where he was strongly associated with the expansion of the transit system, the development of the Central Artery Project, and the design of strategies to comply with the Clean Air Act consistent with economic growth. So those are our 3, and I would welcome now David Luberoff to the podium. David.
And thank you.